Are you planning to rent in Chicago this year and wondering what it takes? In this video, we're going to talk about the rental requirements, including landlord requirements, expectations, and background checks, minimum credit scores and what to do if you have low credit, and all the fees that you should anticipate paying before you move in. First, let's talk about the rental market. It's insanely competitive right now. Prices are up quite a bit year over year. In fact, over the last couple years, they're up over 20% just with COVID adjustments. And really what we're seeing in the city is the rough transition from COVID era pricing. And a lot of that has to do with these rental apartment buildings. Many people got this great discount on a rental apartment. And the way that they got that discount was in the form of months free, right? 1, 2, even 3 months free, I saw in some situations. The reason those big buildings did that is because fundamentally they were able to avoid resetting the rental rate. Think about it. If they give you a $500 discount, when you go to renew that next year, well, now all of a sudden your renewal rate is based on that reduced price. They're already out $500 and trying to work their way back to where the rent was before agreeing to work with you. But if they give you a couple months free, on paper, your lease is still signed for whatever the full rate is. You're just getting a special agreement for a few months free. At the end of that, they're going to slap you with your full month's rent plus whatever adjustment comes with the amount of time that you've lived there for inflation and the cost of rent in the neighborhood. So some people are seeing their bills go up hundreds of dollars a month on rent. And that's something that you should expect. Not everybody's going to see it. I've actually heard some people say they've been very lucky and their particular unit type or their building perhaps is not driving rent up. But I would say that's unfortunately the minority of situations. This year, most tenants I talk to have renewal prices on their existing rental that are shocking to them, somewhere between 5 or even 20+% higher than last year's rental pricing. So if you're getting a higher renewal bill, you should anticipate going into a market that's busier because a lot of people are unhappy with the renewal and they're looking again. You should also anticipate that the inventory in that market is more expensive than the last time you looked. Unfortunately, if you looked 2 years ago and you're coming out of a multi-year lease, it could be 20, almost 30% higher than the last time you were in the rental market. So don't be surprised when you see these high price tags. If you're struggling with that or if you need options around that, your best place to start is to contact a real estate agent and have them explain options to you. You know, in my opinion, some of the easiest ways to cut costs on rent, the biggest one is change your location. If you switch neighborhoods, jump out of Lincoln Park into Lakeview, you could save hundreds of dollars a month just by going to a different location. If you can get roommates and you're okay with it, that style of life, roommates also cuts down on expenses. And that's a really smart decision for many people in life right now. If watching this and thinking about your upcoming renewal is making you consider buying a home, check out my other video on tips for buying a condo in Chicago. I'm seeing many first-time home buyers take advantage of the inventory available in the market right now to find options that work for them. Yes, the rates are higher, but that doesn't mean there aren't opportunities to fit your budget that would be cheaper than what you might pay in rent. Almost without fail, you are going to be requested to fill out proper checks and requirements prior to signing a lease for any apartment. The way that normally looks is you're going to pay a fee, you're going to go through some kind of third-party service, I like CISI, and they're going to actually run verification on your income, your employment, your eviction history. Here in Chicago, we have a 2-tiered application system, meaning legally, landlords should not be running your criminal history on the first pass. The reason being, your criminal history is not, at least on the first round of review, a reason to deny you access to rentals in Cook County. The first round of review is the credit verification, the income verification, employment verification, eviction. After we get through all that, the landlord's had a chance to review and see that you can financially afford to be in their rental. There is a secondary review period where they can do a criminal history check, but they are limited in terms of what they can actually deny you for based on your criminal history. If you're a landlord in Cook County, you need to review the Cook County Ordinance and make sure that you're up to date on what you actually can and cannot do legally when reviewing these tenants. And if you're a tenant, take some confidence knowing that just because you maybe made a mistake and you have something on your criminal history, that's not a reason for landlords in Cook County to deny you at first glance when you're applying for housing. So if you have that and you've been worried about that, don't let it hold you back from submitting an application. My advice, be transparent. Tell your story up front. Be clear about why that's on your record and what it is. Don't leave landlords in the dark and guessing, because they're going to fill in the blanks with the worst possible story. Trust me, I know. What you should do is do everything possible to explain what happened logically and fairly to give yourself the best shot of renting that apartment. This question comes up a lot. Landlords are allowed to ask for these verification steps. So as we discussed, the criminal check is a separate secondary step. But if you have a landlord who's requesting you to go through a credit check or to provide proof of income, these are not requests. Those are mandatory steps in getting accepted to that unit. And if you're unwilling to comply or to provide those items, you're probably not going to be accepted. This is not a negotiation for most landlords. They're there to verify who you are, how much money you make, and the logical likelihood that you're going to pay them rent on time each month so that they don't end up in the hole on their mortgage. Because remember, in the background, your landlord's carrying the cost of that rental while you're there. Landlords get this bad image in everybody's head, right? They're trying to take advantage of us. Most landlords in a city like Chicago are lucky if they're making $100 or a couple $100 a month in profit. Really, the rental cost that they're giving you is a reflection of the cost of their mortgage, the cost of their taxes, the cost of their HOA bills, and really maybe a slight buffer in case things like your dishwasher or your laundry dryer break. A common question I get is there a minimum credit score or a minimum amount of money I have to make to rent a unit? The answer is it depends. Landlords are allowed to set expectations universally for every applicant. For example, they could say all applicants must have a 700 credit score and make 3 times rent in monthly income. That is a fair expectation as long as it's being universally applied to all applicants. Where it gets tricky and where it becomes illegal is if landlords decide that for you, just for your application, they're going to decide you need a specific credit score and you need a specific income level, but they did not apply those standards to other people. Now we're getting into the whole world of discrimination and landlord discrimination, and that's a lawsuit waiting to happen. Ultimately, yes, a landlord can require a minimum credit score. No, they can't just require it for you. It will be required for everybody, and usually it'll be broadly advertised. It'll say in the description of the rental, all applicants must have this credit score and must have this income. So if you're worried about that, I would focus on opportunities where the landlords don't have those requirements. In most cases, if they've expressly stated that that is what they expect, they're not really going to budge on it. Credit scores are a tricky subject, I know, and most people are worried about whether their credit score is high enough. Generally speaking, in leasing, there are options available for people with low or no credit. The most common would be getting somebody who can guarantee your lease, or a co-signer, somebody who does have sufficient credit and income that can sign on the lease with you, basically stating that in the event you miss payments, they will take on the liability to make those payments. Obviously, this is a big risk, and not everybody has somebody in that position. So some other alternative options I've seen, if you are, let's say, income heavy, but your credit is struggling, there are options where, as long as you pass all the other requirements, you've gone through your income verification, you go through your employment verification, and the landlord feels comfortable other than your credit score, perhaps you could offer a certain number of months lease up front. That way the landlord has a higher degree of security. Yes, you have to pay more cash out of pocket, but it's a good trade-off to essentially give the landlord some peace of mind that they will have money for the first few months while you're living there, and then you can proceed with the rest of your lease terms, making payments on time. So might not sound ideal, but the truth is credit is basically the best indicator a landlord has of your ability to repay things on time. It's not the only identifier that landlords are going to use, so if you do have poor credit, don't let it be a reason you don't apply to places unless, again, they have a specifically stated credit requirement and you know you're not going to make the cut. If you need help getting through those situations, I would rely on a real estate agent to help you. I think there are situations where we can match you with either landlords we know who are more favorable to people with poor credit situations. There are also certain apartment complexes out there that are a little bit more favorable or more willing to work with people. And depending on your situation, there are a fair number of housing programs or voucher programs around the city of Chicago that may be able to give you some sort of monetary assistance if finding a rental is proving to be difficult for you. Research your local options. I'll actually drop a link here in the show notes so that you can get to the CHA site and just see their available resources. And of course, you're always welcome to contact me as well. Happy to discuss any specific situation that comes up. One thing many tenants forget when they're about to move in is there's a fair number of fees that come with moving into a new unit. And depending on the building, it might be extensive. For example, my condo building, when I was moving out, there's a $600 move in and a $600 move out fee. That's in addition to a several $100 deposit for the elevator when you're actually moving in to make sure you don't damage it, and a processing fee that you pay to the management company for being a new resident. So all in, before I even ask my tenant to pay any sort of security deposit or non-refundable fee, they already have paid several $100s, close to $1,000 just to move in. These buildings get expensive, and that's pretty common. I think you're going to see in most situations some sort of move-in fee, as long as there's an elevator involved, right? If it's a walk-up, you probably don't have a big move-in fee. What could you possibly damage taking furniture up the stairs by yourself? If you're moving into a big building, you've got an elevator, you're putting couches in there, there's a fair liability, you could scratch something. They may need to reserve it. If it's downtown in a high rise, they may actually need to hire security to stay there and watch your stuff while you're taking it up and down. So each building will have different expectations and fees on the building side, right? Just for move-in fees, processing fees for new tenants, move-in deposits, potentially security fees, depending on where you're located. The second part of that is going to be landlord fees. The traditional way that most people have dealt with in renting is security deposit. The fee that a landlord will charge on top of rent is a security deposit. They hold that in an interest-bearing account until you're done living in the unit. They return it to you with interest, assuming you haven't caused damage, and everybody leaves happy. Now, I will say this has gotten a lot more complicated recently. In Chicago, the city of Chicago is not super friendly to landlords when it comes to disputes about earnest money. What we've started to do instead, and what really has become sort of best practice around Chicago, is to collect a non-refundable fee. So rather than collect a 1-month security deposit that you get at the end of moving out, we will collect a one-time, maybe $200 to $300 fee per person moving into the apartment, non-refundable, that'll cover any damage that would come from your time there. So recapping the fees, in the beginning, you'll pay your credit and background check. That might run you $35 to $100 on a high side. Then you're going to be allowed to proceed with applying for the apartment. You're going to sign the lease. When you sign the lease, at lease signing, that first month's rent is going to be due. Along with that, you'll have any building move-in fees. That's for the elevator, the building processing, application fees, whatever they have. You'll also have whatever the landlord is collecting as their potential damage deposit or non-refundable fee. So either a security deposit, which is often equal to 1 month's rent, or a non-refundable fee. We see $150, $200, even up to $300 per person moving into a unit for non-refundable fees, which the landlord would keep in case of any damages. Let's talk about timing. When should you start looking for a rental? In Chicago, most landlords are operating on a 30 to 60 day notice system, meaning that their landlord expectation is the tenants will let them know if they're going to move out 30 to 60 days before the lease ends. You should be able to see good visibility on most rentals available in the market 30 to 60 days before they come available. The exception would be some of these larger apartment complexes. They do use a system of scheduling out their rental units in which they might have visibility out to like 90 days or 120 in some situations. Most are operating on a closer view. So in some cities, I know people start their rental search 6 months in advance and they try to pre-sign a lease that they'll move into way down the line. Chicago doesn't really operate like that. If you're here and you're about 90 days before your lease end, that's really the time you want to start considering your next move. Think about what you want. Think about if your current rental is meeting your needs. If not, talk to a real estate agent, get a search going so that around the 60-day mark, you really are narrowing in on properties. And between that 60 to 30-day countdown, you're really starting to do showings and get an idea for where you would rent next. The reason you want to get a jump on it is you have to make a decision. You have to decide if you want to renew or if you're going to leave your current situation. in my opinion, it's much less stressful if you give yourself options. Go see what's in the market, decide if it's enticing enough to leave, then have your discussion about your renewal simultaneously, rather than what many tenants do is they say, no, I'm not going to renew. Now they have a 30-day countdown to go find a rental, and they just kind of scatter a search and they sign whatever's available. So do yourself a favor. Start about 90 days in advance, leave yourself a runway, have time to consider your renewal, and you'll have more time to be successful. So that covers it. That's the state of the Chicago rental market in 2023. What did I miss? What questions do you have that I didn't answer? Of course, I'm always happy to connect individually if you'd like to discuss, but leave it in the comments. If you're struggling to find a rental in Chicagoland, don't get frustrated and certainly don't give up. Give me a call today. We'll sit down. We'll have a conversation about options that might be available to you and help you find the right rental for your needs. Thanks. We'll see you next time.